"You should not wear it," the liberal TV host said, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of post-dinner conversations. The room fell silent. All heads turned toward the host, his smirk barely hiding the boldness of his comment. His eyes were fixed on Melania Trump's cross necklace, a delicate symbol that rested just above the neckline of her evening dress. For a moment, it seemed as though time had frozen. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes darted between the host and Melania. The shock was palpable. No one saw it coming. He leaned back slightly in his chair, swirling the stem of his wine glass idly in one hand. Then, with a patronizing chuckle, he elaborated. "The cross. I mean, Melania, you shouldn't wear something so divisive. Times have changed. People might misinterpret the message it sends." The room, still hushed, suddenly felt heavy. You could almost hear the collective inhale of the guests as they braced themselves for what might come next. Many were expecting Melania to laugh nervously, change the subject, or deflect with a graceful smile as she often did in public interactions. But this time was different. Melania Trump, sitting at the head of the table, slowly lifted her gaze to meet the hosts. Her face, calm yet commanding, showed no sign of wavering. She gently placed her napkin on the table as her fingers brushed momentarily against the cross around her neck. "You ask me to remove it," she said softly, her accent imbuing her words with a poignant rhythm. The room was still, save for the occasional clink of glasses being subtly set back down on the table. The host raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly forward now, clearly intrigued to see how she would respond. "No, I didn't ask," he replied, his tone laced with mock civility. "I suggested. You're a public figure, Melania. That cross—" He gestured vaguely in her direction. "It's a bit out of touch, don't you think? People like you need to adapt to the world we live in, not cling to, well, outdated symbols." A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, clearly discomforted by the growing tension. Others remained silent, curious to see how Melania would handle the brazenness of the remark. She didn't rush to speak. Instead, she allowed the seconds to stretch, a silence so profound it demanded attention. When she finally did, her voice had shifted. It was no longer soft, but steady, firm, rooted. "This necklace," she began, lifting the delicate chain and holding the small cross between her fingers, "is not just an accessory. It is not something I wear for fashion or because it matches my dress tonight. It is a symbol of my faith." Her eyes swept the table, connecting with each guest, as though letting her words reach not just the ears, but the hearts of everyone sitting there. "It represents who I am and what I believe," she continued, her tone unwavering. "This cross reminds me to live with humility, to have compassion, to show love, not only to my friends but to my enemies as well, and to stand firm in what I know to be good and true. These are values that I will never apologize for, and certainly never hide." A few guests shifted in their seats, visibly moved by the conviction in her voice. Others remained rigid, caught somewhere between shock and admiration. The host, however, was unrelenting. He gestured again toward her necklace with a slightly forced chuckle. "Come on, Melania. It's not about your personal beliefs. It's about how people perceive things now. Symbols like these, they can alienate, they can divide. You know how sensitive people are these days." Her lips pressed into the faintest of smiles, a smile not born of amusement, but of clarity. "And when have you known me to build my life around what people think?" she asked, her question so direct it left no room for an easy response. The host faltered for a brief moment, clearly caught off guard by her composure. A few of the guests began to nod subtly, as though silently supporting her stance. "Allow me to ask you something," Melania said, leaning slightly forward now, her hands folded neatly on the table. "If I, as a person of faith, am expected to hide my beliefs to make others comfortable, then where does it end? Do I stop speaking about what I love? Do I erase the things that define me? Is that what true freedom looks like to you?" The host opened his mouth to respond but quickly closed it again, finding himself unsure of what to say. She tilted her head slightly as she continued, her voice growing quieter but even more resolute. True freedom is not about censoring yourself to please the sensitivities of others. True freedom is living according to your principles without fear of judgment, without fear of scorn. I respect your right to believe or not believe, whatever you choose. Yet you suggest I should silence mine so the world feels less bothered? Her gaze didn't waver. I will not do that. I will not hide. And I will not apologize. A ripple of energy seemed to sweep through the room, an almost audible hum of admiration, even from those who might have privately disagreed with her. One of the guests, an elderly journalist seated near the center of the table, cleared his throat softly and spoke for the first time that evening. His voice was thoughtful, almost reverent. "You know," he began, addressing Melania directly, "we live in a strange time. A time when conviction is often mistaken for stubbornness, and where faith, any faith, is met with unease." He paused, glancing toward the host briefly before returning his gaze to Melania. But conviction, when it is genuine, has a way of leaving an impression. And, Melania, tonight, your words are not something I will forget anytime soon. There was a soft murmur of agreement from several others around the table. Even those who might have sided with the host earlier now seemed less certain of their stance. Melania took a deep breath, smiling warmly at the journalist. "Thank you," she said simply, before addressing the room as a whole. "I believe that we can all learn from one another, even when we disagree. But that starts with respect. Tonight, I have shared mine for you. This necklace, this symbol. It is my truth. And I hope that you can respect it, just as I respect yours." The host sat back in his chair, his earlier confidence now replaced with a quiet, reflective expression. He didn't speak again for the rest of the evening. The dinner ended not long after, with guests leaving the mansion in subdued thoughtfulness. Conversations that had earlier revolved around light-hearted anecdotes now shifted to more introspective topics, many still reflecting on Melania's words. At the door, as Melania bid farewell to each guest, many of them paused for a moment to offer her quiet words of admiration or thanks. "You have a way with words," the elderly journalist said before stepping out into the night. "A way of reminding us what courage looks like." Melania nodded, smiling softly. "Sometimes," she replied, "courage is simply refusing to compromise who you are." And with that, she closed the door behind him, her cross necklace still gleaming gently as she walked back toward the now empty table.